Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. We've been following the change in Prime Minister over the last 2 days, and it's been quite a roller coaster ride. Ross Kempsell has been with us all the way through. He is, of course, Talk Radio's political editor. I'm going to ask you, Ross, precisely how the story has unfolded. We're going to go back to yesterday when Prime Minister Boris Johnson addressed the nation for the very first time from the steps of Downing Street.
The doubters, the doomsters, the gloomsters, they are going to get it wrong again. The people who bet against Britain are going to lose their shirts because we're going to restore trust in our democracy.
A speech that was big on optimism, big on the top line of belief. Boris Johnson said he wanted the UK to recover its self-confidence and to stop being a self-doubting nation, but you might say was slightly thin on detail, and the reason for that is it was simply so wide. It took in domestic policy priorities, a recommitment to Brexit by the 31st of October, but on the terms of a new deal, which Mr Johnson promised. It will remain to be seen, and that speech could very well be a hostage to fortune, as it was for Theresa May.
And after a very brutal night of cabinet reshuffling, some calling it the night of the blonde knives, Boris turned up at Parliament for his first address to the House of Commons as Prime Minister, where he planned to set out his Brexit idea.
We're going to start right away, providing vital funding for our frontline public services, to deliver better healthcare, better education and more police on the streets. Mr Speaker, I am committed to making sure that the NHS receives the funds it deserves, receives the funds that were promised by the last government in June 2018, and these funds will go to the front line as soon as possible. This will include urgent funding for 20 hospital upgrades and winter readiness. I have asked officials to provide policy proposals for drastically reducing waiting times and for GP appointments. To address the rising tide of violence rise of violent crime in our country, I have announced that there will be 20,000 extra police, keeping us safe over the next 3 years, and I have asked my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, to ensure that this is treated as an absolute priority.
A speech that Boris Johnson gave from the dispatch box, demonstrating he plans to take the fight to Jeremy Corbyn across the chamber of the House of Commons, really without holding back. I think it indicates that PMQs will become very testy again. It may become box office watching, but that speech itself by Boris Johnson again devolved a lot of his promises from the campaign to simply saying, I've instructed officials to give me proposals. At this stage it begins to sound more like the setup for a general election campaign than necessarily a deliverable programme of government, certainly within the first 100 days, which is what Boris Johnson has indicated too, but a sign that the Commons will be the bear pit once again, rather than, as it has been with Theresa May, those lengthy podium speeches.
And Jeremy Corbyn, of course, wanted to know for sure whether Boris was in fact going to be the British version of Donald Trump, and he asked for reassurances about the NHS.
Could Britain Trump take this opportunity to rule out once and for all that our NHS is not going to be part of any trade deal with President Trump and the USA? Will he make it clear that our National Health Service is not going to be sold to American healthcare companies? Mr. Speaker, people fear that far from wanting to take back control, the new Prime Minister would effectively make us a vassal state of Trump's America.
The Labour leader attempting to exploit the chief criticism of Boris Johnson, that he's effectively the UK's Donald Trump. Now, the President of the United States, in fact, suggested that himself only yesterday when he called Boris Johnson, quote, Britain Trump, which is an extraordinary epithet to bestow on the new Prime Minister. Again, Boris Johnson being faced with the similar criticism that you would expect from Jeremy Corbyn as he's made throughout the campaign in a more subtle level. That will now become the dividing line across that dispatch box. It will be a dividing line which is very stark in the Commons, now between Brexit and Remain, or at least a Remain position mooted in a second referendum by the Labour Party, but also effectively perhaps a right populism versus left populism, which is an extraordinary setup for the British House of Commons. We haven't seen it before. It could really bring fireworks.
And that was when it got particularly lively.
I struggled to see the country he described in his description of the United Kingdom today, because the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that unemployment is, of course, down under the Conservatives to the lowest lowest level since the 1970s. Crime is actually down a third since 2010. We have record investment, record inward investment in this country, 1.3 trillion pounds coming. That's fantastic new electric car factories.
I think the question really is, are Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn going to be similar, or are they going to be different? Are we going to say that their style is similar, or are we going to say that these are two vastly different politicians who stand for completely different visions? And that's the fascinating personality aspect of this that the next few months will play out. As really Westminster draws to a close today and MPs go home, you have to look at September and October and say that the stage is set for a huge, huge autumn and winter in British politics.